Jane, thank you so much for giving me your time to interview you on your experiences within the media as an industry expert.
No problem.
So,
Happy to be here.
so you have extensive experience within global media organizations. You've worked at NBC Universal as their employee engagement director. You've been the director of internal communications and culture at Warner Brothers Entertainment, which was, of course, where I met you. And you're now the global executive director of people growth and experience at Warner Media. Can you please tell me a bit about what you do in your current role?
Yeah, sure. So my current role, I've been in since November last year. So it's a reasonably new role in the business because we merged two teams together. So I now lead both those teams. So I lead the people growth and experience team for Warner Media globally. And really my remit is on the people growth side, it's really everything around learning and development for all employees. So anything that's outside leadership and management development sits in my world. So we really have what they call a blended learning approach to the way that we do learning at Warner Media, which is anything from kind of virtual live sessions with our facilitators, so the people on my team, to using third-party content, for example, via LinkedIn or Coursera or Udacity, depending on what the need is. But then also promoting some really great things around podcasts and books that employees should read. So that's the kind of learning and development side. And then on the other side is the employee experience part of the team. So that's really focused on employee engagement, on culture, on employee value proposition, and all of the work that kind of surrounds all of that, and also around the data and analytics. So we have a listening strategy, for example, so how we hear from our employees and how we act on that feedback. So yeah, so quite a sort of big remit, I guess, with a really small team.
That's so interesting, actually. That's so interesting, especially like the learning strategy and the culture side of it, because that's so influential.
Yeah,
on
yeah.
experience.
Yeah, and it's quite unusual, I think, to bring those two roles together, but they totally make sense, especially for the work that we're doing at Warner Media. So the just really briefly, the background is that Warner Media consists of lots of sort of business units and brands being brought together as one. So brands like Warner Brothers, HBO, Turner, CNN are now all Warner Media. So lots of different cultures all coming together as one. And so not only do you have all the processes and systems and tools and platforms in the background that you're having to integrate, you've also got all these different cultures and all these different leaders that you're pulling together as one as well. So it's really interesting time to be there.
Wow, that's amazing. I can imagine like all of those different, because they're part of your team, but they're also kind of like different clients in a way. I can imagine that's so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the people who work for CNN compared to the people that work for Cartoon Network, kind of very different people working on very different content, but they're all storytellers, content makers, or supporting that. So that's the kind of thing that we have in common. So yeah, it's fun.
That's incredible. Wow. Can you please talk me through how your career has progressed and developed to where you are now since graduating from university?
Yeah, so I graduated from university with a degree in sociology and communication studies, and then went straight into, I actually started working in television, so as a freelancer, working for a TV show called The Big Breakfast, which you won't remember because you're too young, but it was basically a kind of youth breakfast show that was really popular at the time. So I worked there for about a year. But it was very much kind of crazy hours, like starting at 4 a.m. and freelance work, and just it was pretty all consuming. So I decided I wanted to stay in the entertainment industry, but in a more sort of permanent role, I guess. So I decided to start working in HR. So worked in HR for a company called Endemol, who are now Endemol Shine, and actually have just been acquired by Banner J, so they're even bigger now. So that was just when Big Brother was starting. So the company kind of grew in the time that I was there. So I kind of started as an HR, I think an HR coordinator, And then 8 years later, when I left, I was an HR manager. So I gained my kind of HR background and experience working for Endemol on lots of really great TV shows. They kind of did a lot of the first reality TV, and some of the game shows that you see around now all came out of Endemol. So after 8.5 years, I ended up leaving to just get more experience somewhere else, because 8.5 years is quite a long time in one job. And then moved into working for HMV, so staying kind of in entertainment, but for a retailer. So moved there, took a bit of a risk because I took a maternity cover role, but I was trying to sort of decide what I wanted to do next. And I thought, right, that will give me 9 months to decide if I want to stay in HR. So did probably, I think, 6 months there. And then they created a role for me as the internal communications manager for Waterstones and HMV. So moved into that role, and I ended up being at HMV, I think, for 4.5 years, and sort of really got the opportunity to blend my HR experience with the internal comms side as well. And it was an amazing job. But then I got the opportunity to go to Universal Pictures. So I'm a big movie fan. So to work for a film studio was, I mean, beyond my expectations of what I thought I'd ever be doing. So moved to NBC Universal and led their internal comms team for home entertainment, and also the engagement side as well. So again, blending my internal comms and HR experience. So I did a couple of years in the UK working in an international role, so travelled all around the world, so Japan, Australia, the US, so really amazing opportunity. And then was asked to move to LA to do a secondment at Universal Studios. So, I mean, as you can imagine, I was beside myself. So moved to Los Angeles for a year, had an office that overlooked the Universal lot, and was, having lunch on the lot every day. It was literally a dream come true. So set up the global internal comms and engagement function there in LA, did my year there, and then came back to the UK and took on a role as, I can't remember what my job title was now, employee engagement director, I think. So that was really working with not just the film part of the business, that was working with all of the other parts, so TV, news and sports, the parks and resorts as well, so kind of broadening that experience. And then I was actually approached by a recruitment company who were looking to find someone to set up a team from scratch, an employee engagement team from scratch at Visa. So I had absolutely no desire to work in payment technology at all, but the opportunity to build something completely from scratch, so a team, a function, was just too much to say no to. So moved over to Visa, did exactly that, built the team from scratch, built out that function. So that was all around employee communications and experience, which is just a space that I love. I love the whole employee experience side of things. So I was there for a couple of years, put the team in place, put the function in place, but payment technology just wasn't my dream. And an opportunity came up at Warner Brothers to work in a UK role. So it was kind of taking almost a bit of a step backwards, because I'd always worked in international global roles, but it got me back into working in entertainment again. But within a year, they'd asked me to move into a global role. And that's where I am now. So, and it was interesting with the role that I'm in now. I have no background in learning and development, but I think with all the experience I've had in HR previously and the experience I have in the employee experience side, it's just such a natural fit between the two, that actually taking learning and development into that wasn't such a big stretch. So I've just been lucky to have had the opportunity to be able to step into that role and try something that I would never have thought I would have tried before.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's a bit about my history and where I am now.
That's amazing. And that progression seems so natural as well. Yeah. What you mentioned, so UK role versus a global role, how are they different in their approach to internal communications? What do you have to do differently?
So I think, well, apart from the hours you have to work in a global versus a UK role, it's been fascinating. And I think especially now that I work with the US again, so the US can be quite US centric. They sort of go US and then international, which is basically 56 other countries. I think culturally, communications wise, they communicate very differently. So if you're communicating with people in Australia versus Japan, for example, you'll be doing that in a really different way. And obviously, when it comes to things like translations, that's another element that you have to think about as well. Not everyone in Buenos Aires, for example, speaks English. So they'll probably be speaking Portuguese. So you have to think about how you best get those messages across. So either you do things that are really visual or you get them translated. So there's lots of different nuances that you have to think about when you're thinking about things globally, because they're not necessarily all going to land well, depending on where you are. So if you go in with a very US centric view on something, it's not going to work everywhere. And then you've also, on top of that, got legalities around things that you can do and say in certain countries. So for example, in Germany and France, you usually have to go through what they call works councils, which is a group of employees that work there that you kind of have to share things with them in advance before they go out to the rest of the business. So there's lots of different kind of elements you need to consider before just blasting something out to the business.
Yeah, that's amazing to hear, actually, to get that insight.
There's a really interesting book actually by someone called Erin Meyer called The Culture Map, which kind of talks a lot about the cultural differences of different countries when it comes to business, if you ever fancy a read.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that recommendation. I'll definitely check that out. Okay, so as kind of cliche as this question is, I think it can be a helpful one just for me to kind of get some more insight.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for yourself looking back at any point in your career?
Got so much advice. I think certainly, just a couple of things. So one would definitely about have more confidence in myself. And I think some of this comes from having some typically female traits. Definitely not saying all women are like that, but I'm quite typical in kind of the self-talk and all of that kind of thing. And probably did way too much, cared way too much about what other people thought when I was maybe early on in my career, and I probably do a little bit still now. So I think just dulling out that self-talk and have a bit of confidence in myself. So I'm thinking back there. And then I think one thing that's stood me in good stead throughout my career is, well, a couple of things. So one, I've always been very curious. So I'm always kind of wanting to learn and knowing what's out there and what's the best practice and what's this company doing, and spending a lot of time kind of staying curious and staying on top of the latest thing, which I think has been really helpful. I've also taken some kind of risky opportunities, as in a maternity cover, which wasn't a permanent job, moving to LA, which was obviously a massive life change, taking the role at Visa because I knew that it was good to have something else outside of entertainment on my CV. And all of those things have brought, development opportunities, learnings, all of that kind of thing. So I think, and I think a lot of that is to do with just ignoring that voice or listening to the voice and then just letting it go, and taking the opportunity and taking the risk. And so I think it would be a bit of that.
Amazing. So I'm currently in my final year of uni. How did you find the transition from uni into the working world? And is there anything that could have made that transition any easier?
Well, so when I left university, the internet wasn't here. So there's a whole other level of complication. So I had to, write to every single production company that there was, an actual written letter, and post, and sit by an actual phone at home and wait for it to ring, because we didn't have mobile phones then either. So I feel like it's interesting, and I was having a chat with someone about this earlier actually. It was harder in a way because you had to, you kind of had to, often people had to know people, or you had to know who to write. So it was a lot harder to research where you should go and then make the connections. So that was really difficult. But I think it's harder for people now because there's so much opportunity. Like everyone, you know, can get their face in front of whoever they need to get their face in front of, and sometimes you just don't know what avenue to go on. Whereas when I was leaving university, I was really clear, I want to work in telly, this is what I need to do to work in telly, and boom, I go. So yeah, I think the biggest thing if you're leaving university now is to just increase your network. So use things like LinkedIn to get connected with the right people, to be doing your research about, okay, this might be the area I'm interested in. Who do I need to be connected with? Who do I need to be following? You know, find the, you know, most companies now will go through LinkedIn first to put a role out there. When I was younger, it was usually done through recruitment consultants. You didn't have LinkedIn. So you just need to be really proactive about following the right roles on LinkedIn so that you know when a job comes up. So I think it's a lot about connection and research and insight, and confidence, just confidence that, you know, you can, you know, with your uniqueness, you've got to offer.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I was actually going to ask if you had any tips for networking, but you've kind of done that in one with LinkedIn. I think it's such a weird position right now when you're trying to network, but obviously with COVID, there are certain like impacts and restrictions to do that.
Although,
yeah,
what that's also brought with it is more opportunities. So if you're not based in London, for example,
yeah,
signing up to webinars and sessions, that it doesn't matter where you are in the world. You know, you could, whereas before, if you were outside London, the opportunities would be potentially harder depending on what kind of role you wanted to go into. So I think actually there's more opportunity to network. You just have to do it in a really different way. And there's more opportunity to be joining panel sessions and webinars and on subjects that you're interested in. And there's things like, so I've just recently signed up to Clubhouse. I don't know if you know about it, but that is kind of an opportunity for people to just chat about stuff that's important to them in a kind of work environment, for example. So yeah, the networking isn't in person, but there are more opportunities in different ways.
I totally get what you mean. I think there was the BFI Future Film Festival over the weekend, so I was going to that, and I think there's loads of BBC events on right now. So it is really interesting to see like that transition and where that's going to go. Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah. What's been like a career highlight for you that you're most proud of?
The career highlight is living in LA. Able to work at Universal Studios. I mean, that's just, just walking under the arch of Universal Studios every day was just, I never took it for granted. It was just a really special thing to be able to be where they were making the content. When you work for a big company like that, if you're in the UK, you feel so far removed from where the content is created, but when you're actually there on the lot. So I'd say that, but also interestingly, even though I didn't sort of like working in payment technology, I think just the opportunity to build a team. And I think it was so wonderful. I'm very much someone who, when they have a team, it's very much we're all in it together, we're collaborating, we're making this together. So to be able to sort of start with everyone from the same spot and kind of build up the team and build their confidence and their experience and, you know, build what we're doing together, I feel really proud of that. So I'd probably say that a highlight sort of from a personal perspective, the stint in LA, and then from a career perspective, probably just building the team from scratch.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, my final question.
Oh, okay.
When hiring, what do you look for in applications and interviews? Like, are there any specific qualities that stand out to you?
Yeah, I think for me, for the roles that I would be hiring for, enthusiasm is a must. I mean, that has to be able to shine through, especially in, you know, in early career roles as well. You know, you can teach people stuff, but if you're not enthusiastic in the first instance, then you're probably not going to go very far. And then I think the other thing is people who've done their research. So, you know, if they're writing to us at Warner Media, knowing the content, you know, so understanding what content we create, being able to reference that. So you can see, you know, they might it's complex. There's quite a few studios out there, and you might mess up what studio it is, but they're just the fact that they've gone out and they've made the effort to do that research, and they're referencing that. I think it's really difficult with CVs, because it's really difficult to make a CV stand out, really hard. So I think you just have to have a really good punchy cover letter that's short, because people are just not going to read streams of cover letters. I certainly wouldn't. So, and I think it's just being able to see, and I think this comes with the enthusiasm piece, is that they've done that little bit extra. They've read that little bit extra, or they've attended something that relates to this. They've just done their homework. So I think it's a lot about that, just showing the enthusiasm, proving that you want to be there. And I think, yeah, and any experience, whatever it might be, that you've been able to have, it doesn't necessarily need to be work experience, but it might be you've attended a seminar on something or whatever it is, that just shows that interest. I think they're the key things for me.
That's brilliant. You mentioned cover letters, actually. Do you think
Yes.
in the cover letter it's more about the research for that specific company, or do you think it's more about the job role?
I think it's more, I want to know about the person.
Okay.
What's unique about you?
Mm-hmm.
We get so many that say, I'm a team player, and all the generic stuff you put on a cover letter, and that's just not going to stand out. You're just going to go, yeah. But when someone talks about, I don't know, some hobby that they've got, or some kind of extracurricular activity that they do, or if it's for us, a film they're really passionate about that made them fall in love with Warner Brothers, or something like that, something that brings your personality truly into. I don't want to read about team building and collaboration skills and that kind of thing, because anyone can write that. I think bringing out your uniqueness is really important.
And it shows like the evidence of it as well, rather than just saying, because anyone can say, yeah.
So it could be, I feel like I'm a team player because I work with a local charity doing this, that, and the other, or something like that. So yeah, totally good point. If you can give examples of, I'm collaborative because I do this, or whatever it might be, or I'm a team player because I'm in a netball team, or something like that. So, just bringing it back to yourself and your uniqueness.
Thank you so much. You've literally given me so much to think about. Like,
okay, good.
Great. Yeah. Couldn't have gone any better, really. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to touch on at all? No,
I think I probably covered everything. That I think you asked really good questions. So I think just everything out. No, they were genuinely. So yeah, I think it's just, persevering and not giving up, and sort of heading for what you want, and just being yourself. I think it's really important. So don't be someone else. It's not worth it. Don't have the energy to do that. So just bring your uniqueness to the situation. Brilliant.
Oh, actually, one final question.
Yes.
I've literally just thought of it, because you mentioned about kind of like the inner voice and having quite like traditionally female traits, and trying to think about how you don't listen to that voice.
Yeah.
How do you kind of go, because I kind of have a similar thing. How do you like combat that?
That's a very good question. I haven't worked that out yet. And actually, I'm reading if you like to read, and it's not actually that long, it's this really beautiful book called The Untethered Soul. And it's all about that. It's about kind of listening to your inner self, but also then going, okay, thanks very much. You've said what you need to say. You can move along now. So it's not just completely ignoring it. It's letting that voice in and just going, I've heard you, thanks, and then letting it go again. So I think that's the bit that I've learned to do, and it will depend on the situation or how I'm feeling in that moment, or whatever it might be, but I'm definitely much better at that than I was. But I think that comes with age and experience, which makes me sound 100 years old, but
no.
But yeah, I think when I was younger I cared way too much about what other people thought, and I can see that in my my husband's daughter and my nieces. They care way too much about what other people think. So yeah, I think it's just accepting that voice is there, and then just making a choice that you go with your gut more than anything.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's such a nice way to end as well. Yeah, thank you so much for this.
No, no problem.
It's really meant a lot that that you could give me your time to talk about it. So thank you.
No, and good luck with everything. Let me know how everything goes.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely. I'll be messaging you on
Definitely,
LinkedIn.
definitely do that.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Speak to you soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye.